Hey, thanks for coming in and hanging out with us, man.
Yeah,
I
super,
appreciate it.
super honored by the invite. I appreciate it.
Oh man, the honor's absolutely ours. And I've been we had this guy Mike Trabolski and this other guy Kevin Estella were over here this weekend running a live event. So I was
Yeah.
getting to hang out with those guys a little, but in between that, man, I was getting to do a little bit of a deep dive into a whole bunch of things that you got going on, man. And I know we got to chat last week too, but I'm an even bigger fan, man, the more I dive in. So
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing on my end. So right back at you. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
I appreciate it. So, we're just going to talk all things Eric right now. I got a handful of guys
That's very uncomfortable for me.
good.
I'm used to interviewing the other people. I'm used to
I
being
know
on the
you
other
are.
on the other
I know
side.
you are. I was going to ask how often, because you do a great job on your show. How often are you getting to go the other way? And is it drastically different for you or just moderately different? What does that look like?
I'd say moderately. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's happening more than it used to. I started my show about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think I'm at like episode 44 or something because I do it every other week.
Yeah.
And I think in the last 3 or 4 months, I've probably been asked to be on about five or six of them. So it's, which hadn't happened before. I think I did one before that. So I think it's just people I'm talking to or talking to other people.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Well, you're
Yeah.
obviously having an impact. When people ask you to come on, are they wanting to talk business? Are they wanting to talk bow hunting? Are they wanting to talk podcasts? Are they wanting to talk collegiate football and coaching? Where are they wanting to take it more?
A lot of it's business and leadership.
Okay.
I'm a rookie when it comes to bow hunting. I mean, that's why I really started the podcast to learn from people, right? I mean, I can't even remember why I got the idea, but it was like I was talking to somebody and like, it's not that hard to do. You just ABC. And I said, well, if I could get on an hour and 15-minute call with some of the best bow hunters in the whole country, like every other week, I mean, the learning curve is going to go through the roof as opposed to me trying to, sending somebody a message, hey, would you mind jumping on a call with me, Mr. Rando?
Yeah.
It's like if you have a podcast, they say yes. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's
Different
kind of
story.
was the nexus.
Good for you, man. Why do you think you had that um willingness to do this? And so here's why I'm at somewhat of a loaded question, but
Yeah.
so much conversation, and this is dovetailing into the leadership conversation.
Mhm.
So much conversation around, well, I would if I had time, this is what right. It's the excuses versus the leadership. You and I talked
Mhm.
last week. It's the eloquent lies that men love to tell ourselves, and we stop learning because a lot of times we'll tell ourselves these lies. We'll give ourselves all the reasons why we don't have the ability to learn, the time to learn, the resources to learn versus just being more resourceful.
Yeah.
I love that you just went, all right, cool. Well, here's a way to do it. What if I go ahead and put this out there? Was that something did you hesitate and BS with yourself for a little bit first? Or did you just go, look, man, this makes sense?
I mean, I had been thinking about doing a podcast for probably a year, and
Okay.
well, so back up a little bit. My son, who's now a senior at South Carolina, in broadcast journalism, he's always been super interested in college football. He's got a college football page on Instagram, and that he started when he was a sophomore in high school. And I actually helped him start a podcast when he was, I think, in 11th grade. And so we did that podcast together for 2 years. Um, and so that was kind of how I just got my feet wet with it. So doing this wasn't really much of a leap because I initially did that to help him kind of move his needle forward on what he was doing.
That's awesome. I love that, man. In the South Carolina, you guys have quite the ties to South Carolina, you in particular
Yeah.
with a coaching background too. Is that why he decided to go there? Because of your experience there?
No, I think he wanted to go to Georgia, and
Okay.
Grady School of Journalism at Georgia is really hard to get into, and
Yeah.
but South Carolina's got a good one, and I do know some people in the market, locally, and he's been able to get some internships at some radio stations, and I did some radio for Carolina like about 4 or 5 years ago, pregame stuff for a few years before I got into the hunting, and I wasn't around on Saturdays anymore, so
Yeah.
that was a connection there, but just kind of. to circle back on your initial question, that's always been something I've been willing to do is figure out how to do something. I put a post up I think in the last couple of days about persistence. And just the basic nuance of it was if you can outlast people or if you're willing to do something that's a little bit difficult, you're going to beat 90% of the people out there because most people just either won't do it because it's hard or they won't stick with it because it's hard. And then they get discouraged with it. So I think it's just always my wife tells me that my superpowers are my ability to network and my ability to be able to kind of do a little something every day with a goal that's like 5 years out. That most people aren't willing to do that, and I think that's been a big part of where I've whatever I've wanted to do has helped me get there. Is I don't expect immediate success.
Beautiful. So that leads into directly where I wanted. This has all just been out of curiosity for me as I'm just
Yeah, I
reading
know.
stuff, man. So that's great because that's really it dovetails right into some of the places I want to go. One of your descriptions you have is aesthetic business development, right? Podcaster, bow hunter. You said I know odd combination. Right. And so I want to go down the leadership route and the business route and the business coaching. And I also want to go, maybe go down the podcasting route a little bit. But both of those and I want to go down the coaching. I mean, you've got plenty of experience coaching for a long time. All of that speaks to what you just said. This game of outlasting, this game of just being consistent, and humans' inability or unwillingness, I guess I should say, to do that more often than not. And I want to get your perspective on that. So let's go down the business route first, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Aesthetic
Sure.
business development. We're big on definition of terms. What do
Yeah.
you mean by that?
So I help plastic surgeons set up their practices. Anything from it's a brand new guy coming out of fellowship. I help them do a market research study to figure out where to put the practice in that city. I work with a broker to help them find a building. I help them negotiate the lease. I work with an architect to help them plan the surgical center and the practice. I help them hire a manager and put a staff together. And then I help them develop their marketing plan. And I put a sales and lead management process in place with key performance indicators to make sure that their team makes some money because all the guys that I work with and gals that I work with they're all cosmetic, so none of them are taking insurance. They're all cash pay businesses. So it's direct patient acquisition. It's all sales. And that's really where my background is, whether it was football in recruiting and then moving into medical sales and sales training with a couple of Fortune 500 companies, and then eventually running my own businesses in the same marketplace that I'm in now. It's all customer acquisition and sales.
Got it. So I didn't understand. So is that where the medical sales, is that what connected you to this world? Because
Yeah.
I knew, the football background. I've got kind of a little bit about what you're doing here. I wasn't
hmm
sure where that part came in,
So
coaching medical sales.
what honestly brought me into this world was so my wife and I met at the same company. She was up in Missouri. I was in South Carolina. Um, we both got selected to go to this kind of training. They picked 10 people out of a sales force of about 800 to go up to this 2 week training thing. And that's where I met her. And we eventually got to know each other. We wrote a couple training programs nationally that they implemented. And long story short, we eventually dated long distance, got married, and she couldn't get a transfer down to South Carolina. So she got a job with a company called Allergan. It's a company that makes Botox. They
Mhm.
make all kinds of cosmetic stuff for plastic surgeons. They make implants, that kind of stuff. And she got a job in their consulting division. They taught her how to do business development consulting to help practices that they had identified as growth opportunities. And she would go in and help them grow a certain part of their business. And then, long story short, she had a practice that she had worked with for a couple of years. The doctor's business partner left. She didn't want to run the practice anymore. She said to my wife, if you know anybody who wants to buy a practice, let me know. And we were looking at for a way for probably a year to get out of corporate America. And she came home and said, we need to buy this thing. And quite honestly, I thought she was nuts.
Mhm.
It was like we had never run a business before, but we knew it was a sales and marketing business. And we knew that's what we knew how to do. And we basically just talked about it and said, if we took all the same skills that we use to launch a product into a marketplace with a
Mm.
large company and just implement those same things in a cash pay practice. It's no different. And that's what we did. And so we bought a business that at the time that we bought it, I think it had done 400,000 in revenue the previous 2 years, which in that business is not very much when you look at your overhead.
Mm.
Um, and I think by year two, it was doing 2.5 million. Um, and so we basically built it up and sold it within about 2.5 years. And then we took that money from the sale and we started a plastic surgery center up in Charlotte. We built a surgical center to go along with it. So we had our own OR, hired a doctor, and that's kind of how we did it. And we did that for 12 years. And my consulting business just kind of organically grew out of that. People just kind of started calling, going, "How are y'all getting busy? Like, where did you come from? You know, all that kind of stuff." And a large company that we bought a lot of supplies from asked me if I would do some consulting work for some of their clients, and that's how my consulting business started.
It's kind
And
of
that's all.
organic.
So we sold all that stuff back in 2016, and I've just been doing business development consulting for people since then. That's what I do.
How cool, man. I didn't know that part of it. So how much this is so interesting to me and to the the entrepreneurial brain, that concept of scaling and growing is one thing. The concept of understanding the process of scaling and growing, but transferring that to various industries, I think is super fascinating. How much do you pay attention to trends now when it comes to sales and marketing? Obviously, you're not responsible for growing that business, but you do still have your businesses, the consulting side of it. The sales and marketing that you are implementing, is it much of the same as before, or are you finding yourself in 2025 with whether it's because of social media or, every entrepreneur's favorite thing to blame everything on, the algorithm, right? Is blocking my, right? So like everybody's got, again, the
Yeah,
excuses as to why they can't. Do you see a lot of the
yeah.
process being the same?
Um, I mean, they've changed a lot, obviously, in the last, whatever, 15 years. So when
Yeah.
we first were doing our practices, we were doing a lot of TV and radio, and SEO. That was basically, and then Google AdWords kind of took over the game,
Yep.
and Google AdWords are a huge part of things for a long time. They still are a huge part of it. Social media became a really big component, about 5 years ago. And so now, all my clients have to have some kind of a social media strategy. And then, in the last, and that's like organic social media. But
Mm.
then you also have to have, if you're doing it well, a paid social media strategy. And that's, retargeting and, basically billing out what I call clones, or
Sure.
basically where you map people coming to your website. You
Get a
use
warm
AI
house.
to build out a personality for that person, and then you use that to target people off of a paid social and that kind of stuff. So I'm involved in all of that. I don't build it. I just bring the players in, and then I
Yeah.
oversee the strategy. But I'm in the middle of it, so it's changed 100 degrees in the last 10 years.
So interesting. Okay, so again, this is just where my brain goes on the pattern. So when you're building teams to go try to create an outcome for these businesses, and you're taking a look at strategy and you're putting the right players in place,
Hmm.
how similar or dissimilar is that for you coming from the sports background and the coaching background? Right? Because there's the X's and O's and the Jimmys and Joes when it comes to coaching in the sports as well.
Yeah.
And you're leading and you're trying to create more leaders and you're working towards that outcome. Do you have it, does it feel the same in a lot of regards, or does it feel like two different types of leadership for you?
Yeah, it's it's different, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
In football, um, you had people who, or I would say the majority of the people you were coaching had a mutual goal, right?
Yeah.
They had personal goals they wanted to achieve, but it was very hard for them to achieve their personal goals without achieving the team goals. Um, those, highly motivated individuals in most cases, obviously you had to figure out how each one of them, to me, the biggest challenge in coaching was figuring out, okay, what made each one of those guys tick in terms of how do I get so and so to respond, when hollering at that guy and crawling up his rear end, he shrinks from that, right? When this guy responds to that. And so that was probably the biggest challenge in coaching young men in football. In the corporate world, it's very different, especially in the world that I work in, because it's the employees are 95% women. Um, and you also have a huge, the HR environment is so different, even from what it was 20 years ago when we started our first practice. Um, and I have clients all over the country. So depending on the state that I'm in, the HR environment's very, very different. So, I've got a client in Colorado, and we've got, a situation just in Colorado where I've got, an employee who's tardy just enough that they can keep their job. Calls in sick all the time, but they get 6 full sick days a year in Colorado outside of their PTO. So, they kind of test the boundaries of everything. Whereas in other states, we could have terminated that person, 6 months ago. So every one of those, my unique balance in where I'm in now is coaching the owners of the practices,
Mm.
because physicians by nature, the reason they become physicians most of the time is because they're very caring individuals. They love people, they want to help people. That uniquely makes them empathetic in most situations, but empathy is not always great as a business owner, because you tend to let people get away with things you shouldn't. You don't coach them or discipline them in any way. And you end up allowing this kind of culture to run away instead of establishing a culture. So my biggest challenge in my business now is helping the owners of these practices recognize how to develop the kind of culture they want, and recognize that that culture doesn't just happen because they want it to happen.
Mm. That's so good, man. That's got to be, and that's so hard to that's so hard to lead when you've got so many that are wanting to develop those different cultures. And I imagine a lot of times they probably don't even understand. They probably don't necessarily even know the culture that they want. Would that be a fair assumption when you're trying to help them through that and they're like, I don't even really know how to define that for myself?
Yeah, most of them. So a lot of them will say, I don't want to deal with the problems.
Yeah,
Um, and the first thing I'll tell them is, then you need to go work at the hospital and not own your own practice.
yeah, that's
That's
right.
part of, if you're going to run a practice and own a business, like, these are your people, right? And you either figure out how to develop them and develop your culture, or your culture is going to just develop itself, and then you're going to have to live with it. And that's
Mm.
the biggest challenge, is getting them to recognize that they have to be an active component in it, and that they can't just like hire a manager and expect it to happen.
Mm. So tough, man. So talking about, I'm gonna pivot just a little bit because we're talking
Hmm.
about the development of this culture. And I had a call yesterday on the way home from, actually I was in Charlotte for a little bit yesterday, and on the way home, talked to the buddy of mine that I grew up playing sports with, and we were talking about the culture of really what culture was just in general as we were growing up, where we grew up in California. And we were talking about the culture that was perpetuated by some of the coaches we had, and it was great. It was all very, very positive. We look back on that culture very fondly, and we started to talk about a little bit of what you're saying right here, how certain guys on the teams responded well to the style of coaches that we had, and how a couple of guys shrunk away from it, and how we were like, gosh, that's kind of a bummer because we feel like that guy had more talent than maybe we did, or some other guys on the team, but they shrunk away from that, and the coach didn't change, and maybe that's again, looking it back from 30 years ago as a kid, we didn't
Hmm.
see the coach change, to help that person as much. It was just, here's the culture, but it was this strong culture, and there was a lot expected on young people, and it made me think of you and leading and building up so many teams. And I was thinking of it more from a coaching perspective in football. What are your thoughts on leading young people? Have you seen the transition? Because we wanted to not come across as the old guys like, back in our day kids were harder. We don't want to be those guys. Also, somewhat objectively, it's like, gosh, man, I remember specific things, specific instances, and I feel like if I did that with a group of young men now, a very small percentage would respond versus large percentage. Do you think there's been a cultural shift into a somewhat of a softness altogether when it comes to leading youngsters in sports?
I've experienced a little bit of both, and I think a lot of it is where you are. And so I'll just give you a couple examples. If
Mhm.
uh, I coached in public school, I coached at a private Christian school, and I coached at a private school that wasn't a Christian school.
Mm,
Um, the kids at the public school that I coached at were kids from a pretty good community, but it wasn't a rich community. It was pretty much a good sample of America. It was um, probably 50% of the kids had dads, 50% didn't. There were some kids for some really rough areas. There's some kids from some good neighborhoods. Um, and those kids, we could coach them really hard.
mm,
Um, I went to a Christian school that had a winning season in 12 years. And we coached those kids like we had coached the public school kids, and we had parents calling us, wanting to call us into the office all the time. Luckily, we had an AD that supported us, and we changed that culture. And then the last place I was at was a private school, and this was the one that I found the most interesting, where most of the families are married. A lot of entrepreneurs. It puts out the highest SAT scores in the city.
mm.
Um, it's these kids, their families run businesses. It's probably the most affluent, group of people in the city, and they're the toughest kids that I had coached. They weren't the most physically talented, um, but every one of them, you could tell they came from a culture in their family that their parents taught them like, hey, we got here a certain way, and that's how you're going to get there. Like, we're not going to baby you because we built this. You're going to have to build your own thing, or you're going to have to earn your way into the one that we've built. And those kids, I mean, they would take your head off, and they could take coaching the same way that we took coaching, Matt. I mean, those kids were amazing. We won 5 state championships. They've actually won 14 in a row. So I mean,
Wow.
this is like an insane school, but that's a culture of performance that comes from those families. And then because they've built that and these young kids grow up and see it, those young kids know what the expectation is because the older kids hold them accountable. And when they're slacking, those older kids are on them before we are.
God, I love that. So here's where my Socratic brain goes to. So when I look at the concept of accountability, at the end of the day, all accountability ends up being self-accountability, but you can create that culture of accountability, right? That culture that says, hey, look, if you are going to be here, there are left and right boundaries that we are going to operate within. Is it more important in your mind if you're building a culture that way to really pour into those that are already holding that standard, or to cut off those that are not holding the standard? I know the answer is yes, right? The answer is both. I know that. From a Socratic educator standpoint, if you had
Hmm.
to pick one, is it pouring gasoline on it or cutting off the dead weight?
I mean, if you're going to make me pick one,
Mm,
um, it would be pouring in.
mm,
I do think the cutting off the dead weight is extremely important, and that's where I think probably more business owners fail than succeed.
yeah,
But I think if you made me pick one, it would be pouring into the other ones because I think if you develop the right culture and the people who want to be there and you
yeah,
actually help them achieve the goals they want to achieve, they're going to either bring those people along with them and raise them up, or they're going to perform at such a high level that it's going to make it much easier for those other people to weed themselves out.
yeah. I would openly disagree if I disagreed, but I don't. Um, I very much have started to lean that way too, even within the organization here. And as we grow and scale, like I've just become more attracted to the idea of really pour into those who are pouring in, and see if that helps, the rising tides sort of concept.
Don't you think it also helps you, like as a business owner, right? Because if your focus is always on, and this is one of the things that I have to talk to my business owners about, because it's very easy for your brain and your emotional energy to always go to the negative piece and the piece that you're not happy with. And,
Correct.
and when you do that, you're not as happy in terms of being in your business, running your business. but you also are by default, your emotional energy is bad.
That's right.
Everyone picks up on that and feels that. And your people who are performers are not really getting out of you what they could be, right? You're not raising them up and creating an environment that they really want to be in because you're always frustrated with the negativity of what you're dealing with.
Bingo.
And so even those people who, if they got a lot of your positive energy would
Mhm.
probably, continue to rise and even perform at a higher level. Those people are getting the not the worst part of you, but they're not getting the better part of you. And so I think
That
that's if you kind of recognize that in your own business and the way you're dealing with your own employees, like, hey, I'm a better person when I'm focused on these guys than when I am on these people.
I could not agree more. It is that we talk about the Heraclitus quote quite often, where it's, and I'll paraphrase it, but it's, out of every 100 men, you have X amount that shouldn't be there. You've got 10 or that are the warriors, right? The one
I
that's going to
tell
bring
them,
everybody
yeah, I
back.
say this one all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, you've
Yep.
got that whole quote, but we see that quite a bit in, the classes that come through from the mentorship side, from those that are affiliating, we just see it so often where you've got, this 10% that are really the ones that are driving. It's not
Mm.
even the Pareto principle. It's not even the 80-20. We see it so often where you got that 10%, that's really driving that. And that I have consciously had to work on making that shift for exactly what you're talking about, where I was like, okay, trying to solve the problem for the 80% over here or the 90%, which is inherently making me a little more stressed and giving less time for that. What if I switch that? There's a whole lot more peace that comes here, and there's a whole lot more movement that goes forward because we've got the people that are there to really drive things forward. Yeah, I think you nailed
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you just, I mean, this is a personal example for
that.
myself, right? So I don't know, probably 15 months ago, I was not liking what I was doing. I had been doing it for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
I was not happy, and I was saying to my wife, like, it kind of got worse and worse and worse. And I was like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this. And now I make a really good living, and I'm able to because of that, I'm able to contribute a lot of resources to other causes that I care about.
Okay.
But I literally got to the point where I was like, I don't know if the money's worth it.
Mhm.
And it ended up all being about a couple clients that I was working with who were super negative all the time. And I didn't even recognize it. I was sitting here blaming it on what I was doing. And I
Mm.
wasn't self aware enough to go, it's not what I'm doing, it's who I'm doing it with. And I just got lucky, and those people kind of fell off based upon when their contracts were. And a couple newer people came on that I really liked working with. And literally within 4 months, I was like, it wasn't what I'm doing, it's who I was doing it with. And I made the conscious decision like right then and there. I don't care how much money it is. I'm going to be super picky about who I work with from now on. And I've said no to, I think, 3 people in the last 6 or 7 months. And I only take 5 clients at a time. So they're like pretty lucrative each client. And saying no to somebody is a lot of money, but it's not, there's no money that's worth being, in a situation where you don't love being there or where you don't at least enjoy being there. And so I think, just back to what you said a minute ago, pour into those people that, that you feed off of just as much as they feed off of you. And your energy about what you do is going to be so much better than if your focus is always on the people that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. You still have to deal with those people, but they don't need to be your primary focus and be the source of your energy.
So good, man. It's so important, and it's a lesson that um, I can say early on, started, first business starting a decade or so ago. Um, it was something that I had heard, but I wasn't listening to, and had to learn the hard way, for sure. With the
Well,
early,
it's hard when you're starting a business too, right? I mean, it's easier to be selective once you're established and you don't have to take that person. If you took them, yeah, hey, that's extra, but it's not like I got to pay bills with them. It's
that's
a little
right.
more difficult in the beginning. So,
Yeah, it's a harder thing. But it ends up being a hard lesson to learn too.
it,
Um,
it is.
I want to bring these guys in too, but I want to ask something else first before I grab Mikey. Um, you've got all these lessons that you're learning through coaching in all these different avenues, through coaching in football and getting to see, the experiences that you've laid out here, through coaching in business and leading the teams you have now, and all the experience there. But throughout the entire thing, you're a family man. You are focused on leading your family as well. How did that evolution look? Did you find the various scenarios changing the way you looked at leading your own family, either what you were involved in, or as you see, culture change, and again, social media comes in, or all what as culture has shifted too, have you found yourself consciously changing the way that you lead, and especially with kids going, all right, well, now the world's changing, and like how much of that do you think shifted over the course of raising these amazing humans?
Ugh, like I can't tell you how much it's shifted,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's me, right? It's
Yeah.
just, I
Right.
mean, I wish I wish that I had the same thought process now, or
Yeah.
20 years ago that I have now.
Yeah.
My situation is my wife and I. She had, I think she was married previously for about 10 years. I was married previously for about 7. Um, I was always a believer, but I didn't always live as a believer. I always believed in God. I didn't always live for Christ. And so that was a big part of, my wife and I now been married 21 years almost. That was a huge part of, when we started dating each other, we both had this self-recognition of there's been a lot, a lot of me in my life and not a lot of him in our life. And so that was a commitment we made together before we ever decided to get married. When we did get married, we had a traditional, Christian ceremony, but we also had a covenant part of that ceremony, and we made a covenant commitment to each other that no matter what, like we were going to make it work. And so we have a blended family. She came in with 2 young kids. I came in with a young son. And then we ended up having a daughter together who's now 19 years old. And so my evolution as a father, I wish I could have been the father to my older kids that I have been to my daughter and to my younger son. They got kind of me thrown into an immediate family with 4 kids where, I was coming in with one young one, and I had a temper and not a lot of patience. And I think the biggest thing that I've really tried to be intentional about, especially in the last few years, is gratitude and contentment in any situation I'm in, as
Mhm.
opposed to, always kind of trying to will change, to my timeline and to my desire, and being a lot more intentional about my prayer life and recognizing that if I really am trusting, in the Lord like I say I am, then I recognize there are seasons that He's going to put me in, and there are situations that He's going to put me in that He wants me there for a reason. And if it's not what I want to be in, I have to still be able to accept that and be prayerful about it and recognize that, hey, if He wants to happen what I want to happen, then it's going to happen in His time. And that really has had a huge impact on the way that I deal with my kids. And I do know that my older kids, now that one's 31, just had a birthday, one's 27, and we've got 3 young grandkids in her family. And those two really, like, I mean, it's an entirely different conversation. Some of the stuff we went through with them, like some serious challenges to our family. Like the fact that we stayed together and stuck together through the whole thing is pretty incredible. But now it's, they get the best part of me. And so now, even though we went through a lot of really difficult stuff, I mean, we had a birthday party over here Saturday for one of my grandsons in the morning. And then our oldest came over for, we had his party in the afternoon. And I mean, we had, I don't know, 20 something people here at the house. And it was amazing. Like it was, you would never have thought 20 years ago that it was going to be like that in our house. And I give a lot of that to our commitment to each other and our commitment to, continue to try to grow in the Lord and just being patient, giving stuff over.
Good for you guys, man. That patience conversation is an interesting one too, knowing your, knowing the background, knowing your DNA, and at least sharing that. And
It's hard, man. That's
man,
a hard one for achievers.
oh man, right? That does those don't often
That's
go hand in hand. Like high level
they
athlete,
never do. That's a struggle
patient.
bus.
High
Big
level
time.
coach, patient. High level entrepreneur, patient, right? Like you
Mm,
just those are you're
no.
talking two ends of a spectrum a lot of times, man. That's not easy.
It's not easy. It is something I have to focus on every day because
Yeah.
it's not built into me.
Yes, sir.
It's something
Yes, sir.
I really have to turn over and
Yes.
be
Yeah.
prayerful about because it's not who I am.
Man, I understand. I feel that to my core.
I think it's not who a lot of us are, right? I mean, if you're kind of like you said, whatever, use whatever term you want, but if you're an achiever, an alpha, one of those, if you're the guy who likes to go out and conquer everything and take stuff on, there is going to come a point in your life. It may be young, it may be older, um, where something's going to bring you to your knees, and
Mm,
you got to have, not just faith in yourself, but you've got to have faith in something bigger, or you're gonna at some point you're not going to be able to do it on your own.
yeah. Gonna hit a wall you can't get through.
Yep.
Man, oh man.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean that's a whole. You want to go down a whole different route. I mean that's I've had three back surgeries, and I went through a period of time where I was 80 pounds heavier than I am right now, and I was taking 60 milligrams of oxycodone a day, and could barely like walk to the end of my driveway. So, I mean, it's like I've gone through some stuff in the last, 20 years, and that one was a prayer thing and a God thing and a, bringing the right people into my life to help me heal and help me get functional again. And but that's all, like my family's gone through so much stuff, and it's, you that was the one that I couldn't will my way through,
mm,
you know.
mm. Yeah, you weren't the willpower wasn't the thing. Yeah,
No. Mm-mm.
that's
Nope.
such an interesting, yeah, and it's interesting choice of words too, knowing our mentor last week, we had Craig Ballantyne, and we were talking about willpower and how certain things, he wrote this book, it's called The Dark Side of Discipline, and we were talking about that, and he says, look, discipline is a great thing, and at some point though you do start to train yourself to believe that it's a willpower over everything, it's a willpower through everything. And he says sometimes it's got to be this shift in identity so that you're not having to will yourself through things. So I think there is a conscious decision there, but then some of the stuff you were just talking about right there, it's not even necessarily a willpower thing. Okay, that's not going to work. Changing the identity, and what you identify as or who you identify with, that's a part of it. But man, that support system too. That
Yeah,
support.
that one was my honestly, that one was my wife. Like I will tell you, and I'm biased obviously, but I always tell people that yeah, my wife is gorgeous, but the thing that knocked me over with her is her intelligence and just who she is as a person.
Yeah.
And the thing that really like shook me out of the whole thing was, she sat me down one day and said, "Look, I know you're miserable because I know you hurt, but she's like, you're taking so much medication, you're not the same person anymore."
Mm.
And she's like, I might get choked up on this one. But she said my daughter said something about it to her.
Oh. Mm.
And I was like, all right, I'm going to get it figured out. I'm going to go to somebody, I'm going to figure it all out. And I was finally willing to go get help. And I had always been like, hey, if I don't take pain medication, I'm just going to be miserable my whole life. And through that whole process, the Lord put a physical therapist in my life who I had seen multiple physical therapists who had done nothing. And this guy was a miracle worker. I've actually had him on the podcast, but this guy got me like place where a surgeon couldn't get me. And that was kind of the beginning of me getting rehabilitated. And the hunting thing was all part of that, like it was my long-term goal was when he came in and evaluated me and he said, I think a lot of your pain and a lot of this stuff is coming from muscle and ligament imbalance that's been built over 5 years of kind of walking hunched over. And he's like, I think, physiologically, yeah, you've got some stuff, but I think we can get past that. And he's like, what do you want to do? And at the point that he asked me this, I literally couldn't get to the end of my driveway, hardly walking without just being miserable. And I said, well, I can't. And he's like, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you want to do.
Mhm.
I said, I want to go out west and elk hunt. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I said, it means 40-pound pack on my back, 8 to 12 miles a day for a week. And he's like, he goes, let me evaluate you for an hour and I'll tell you. And after an hour, he goes, I think we can get you there. So I spent 18 months training, and that's what I did last fall. And I went out to Colorado and I did a DIY elk hunt. I didn't kill an elk, but that I won the battle. That was like an 18-month deal to get there, and that all started with my wife, you know, and me being willing to listen and not letting my pride get in the way.
Freaking love that. And I love don't tell me what you can't do. Tell
Yeah,
but tell me
no.
what you want to
Tell
do.
me what you want to do.
Isn't that something we need to say more often? Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of beautiful and intelligent,
Here comes Mike.
here comes Mike. That's right. That's right.
But I know for sure my wife married me for looks because I'm dumb as a rock. So I feel like I won something there.
You did. I talked to her. I was talking to her about it this weekend. She said that's all you had going, and she's like, that kind of is still sort of a thing. I was like, I get it, man. I get it. So we'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I always my football analogy is I always tell people I way out punted my coverage.
There it
That's
is.
exactly it.
There
Yep.
it
Well,
is.
Eric, dude, thanks so much for joining, man. Just
Yeah, glad to do it,
selfishly,
brother.
I'm super excited to have you on here. I've got a million questions. I'm gonna limit it. I'm gonna be selfish. I'm gonna ask two questions, but
Oh, get
I
it,
had
bud.
them written down before you guys even jumped on, and you've already touched on both of them in some way, shape, or form. So when we talk about building a culture, my wife and I are
Yeah,
diligently working at launching an Apogee campus here right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we are building our team. We're getting really close to making an offer to somebody. And but then we're also going to handpick these families, like very, very
yeah.
strategic. So when you, from a coaching lens, get like a new football team, what are some of those universal characteristics that you're looking for in like a locker room guy? And like, what are some of the roles that make every team a team? Like not necessarily you have your skilled players, but like what makes the guy a team guy or a locker room guy?
hmm
Mm.
Um, I think one of the top skills is somebody that's a problem solver. That's when I'm interviewing, and I think one of the biggest skills that I learned in corporate America and through a lot of the training that I went through is how to interview well, um, and what an interview process should look like. One of the biggest things I'm looking for is someone who is a problem solver, not somebody who, um, is just a worker bee. I mean, you got to have some worker bees in the hive, but there's always going to be stuff that comes up, and problem solvers are people that by nature figure out how to get stuff done. And not only are they going to get something done, but other people are going to see them figuring out how to get something done. And by example, they're going to go, oh, well, they just figured that out. I guess I just need to figure this out. And so that's probably one of the biggest ones. When I'm looking at somebody's resume, I'm always looking at job duration. Even in the culture now where people job hop a lot more, is like that's whether you call that an attribute or not. I want somebody who's at the very least been at their jobs for 2 to 3 years. I don't like to look at a resume that's got, if there's one blip in there, I'll let them tell me about it and I'll potentially accept it. If there's more than one blip, I don't even interview them. So I'm looking for longevity, because that also speaks to the way people work within a culture. People who stay places are people who tend to figure out how to make it work there. People who jump around a lot are people who are chronically unhappy in many situations, or they're always looking for you to figure out a way to make them happy. And you've got to have people who are able to figure stuff out.
Super helpful. It is. And I mean, one of the things you said is kind of one of those questionable pieces right now. And so, no, that's very helpful. And second question is, as a man of faith, how do you integrate that into your coaching, or do you at all? Is it like two different things? Is it a parallel thing? Is it integrated? Because we want to run a faith integrated campus. We don't want to teach the Bible, but we want to make sure
hmm
that we're rooted in Scripture and it's just part of what we do.
Yeah. So that's a little bit more difficult in the corporate environment than I'm in. You know, I'm very open about who I am and what I do. So if I'm, you know, with clients or whatever, like I don't, my wife and I have this rule, we don't ever go out and mix company without the other one if there's alcohol involved, right? So that's one of the things that I always stick to when I'm working with a client. Um, and I don't ever hide who I am. You know, obviously, it's kind of pretty present on my social media. So anybody that looks me up is going to know that that's an important part of my life. But on the work side, in a corporate environment, if they ask me about it, I talk about it. If it's not something that I'm, you know, pushing on or not even like kind of bringing up to a client unless they're inquiring with me. But that's different than those aren't my businesses, right? People are paying me to help them build their business, which means my mission is their mission. Um, but this is your business. So I think you fundamentally, if you want to build a faith-based organization, then that needs to be, you know, kind of part of your mission statement. And it needs to be when you're building, I always tell people a mission statement isn't something you just write on a plaque and put up on the wall, right? The mission statement should be your map and it should be short enough that people understand, like your team should know it. Um, and when I say a map, that basically means what I would like a mission statement to do is, hey, 2 years down the road, if you're somewhere, you know, in the woods and your phone doesn't work and nobody can get a hold of you and they have to make a difficult decision, your mission statement should be what they look at to go, what am I supposed to do? Right?
Mm.
It's more a philosophical, like, this is who we are and this is how we make decisions. So this is where our integrity lies, whatever that it means to you. It should be something that somebody can look at within your organization and go, I have to decide between A and B. What does our company say about that? And that should be able to make that decision for them pretty easily. Whether it's, you know, a customer-based mission statement or a faith-based mission statement, whatever it is, that should be the you know the fundamental roadmap to decision making within the in your company. And I think that's not only true of, you know, somebody 2 years from now, it's true of you in anything that you do, right? Whether you're going to put a certain curriculum in place, whether you're going to hire a certain person, any kind of decision within your organization, you should be able to look at that and go, what do our fundamental beliefs say about this? And if you do that, you're going to have very consistent structure and a very consistent way that you staff and build your business from the ground up because it's not always going to be based upon like how you feel at the time or whether you connect with this person or whatever. It's going to be based on a core set of principles that you built really early on that direct and guide everything you do.
So powerful, man. And now you just gave me so much homework, so I appreciate that. You know.
Well, the other thing too, if you have like, I don't want to, you know, I know whatever, I don't want to take up too much. I've got as much time as anybody wants. So, but from an interview perspective, there's one thing that if there's entrepreneurs on here, this is one of the most important things I think around an interview that I ever learned. It's called a STAR question. And it stands for the ST stands for situation, the A stands for action, and the R stands for result. When you ask questions in an interview, it's very easy for people who are good at sales to kind of generically BS their way through an answer and make you feel really good about the answer. You know, how would you handle this situation? How would you handle this situation? Well, they can make something up. What you want to do is create a question that makes them answer that with an actual situation they've been in, right? So, star question would sound something like this: If you, hey Mike, has there ever been a time, you know, in your previous position or previous positions where you had a peer that wasn't happy with one of the directives that was coming down from management? They didn't like whether it was a rule, whether it was something the way you dealt with your customer. Have you ever had a time that that's happened? Yes. Okay. Can you tell me about that specific time? Right. So I want to know what the situation is. Tell me what the directive was. Tell me what he wasn't happy about. How did he express his unhappiness? Okay. Tell me how you handled that situation when he came and brought that to you. So what I'm looking for is a problem solver, someone who's collaborative and kind of directs that person to whatever the company says he should have done, whether that's go directly to a manager to speak to them about it, you know, whether that's, hey, we want, you know, our employees to help diffuse the initial situation, but I want to see what action he took to see if he's a problem solver, right? And then I'm going to have him tell me what he did, and then I'm going to say, okay, what was the outcome? Tell me what the result of that situation was. And I want to ask like three of those in an interview. And now you may not ask that in the first interview. Your first interview is probably going to be more of a screening. Do they check all the boxes? You know, personality wise, do you kind of think they might be a fit? But when you get into the second interview, like you should ask at least three star questions, maybe four. And those star questions should be based around fundamental components that you think are essential to the position you're hiring for. So whatever that is, you know, you're trying to uncover how do they do that, you know, in that because I'm going to have them do that in my business, right? I'm going to have them be responsible for X, or I want to know what they do, you know, when somebody's not happy with, or like you got to gossip or whatever, you know, in my business, there's a lot of that, you know, where people just come in and they burn time in the back gossiping. Like I want to know how somebody, you know, a peer deals with that situation. But whatever the fundamental aspects of your business, that. And then the other thing I would say is, and I do this with a lot of people, is role play. So put somebody in a situation that you know that they can, like, you're not going to ask them to, you know, do something they don't know how to do. But if you're trying to evaluate how they would do something and you know their job was like, just for me, I hire a lot of salespeople. So I'll say, I know what I'm looking for them to do in a certain situation. And I'll say, okay, we're going to role play a phone call because I know they've sold in the past. I'm going to be the customer. You sold whatever tile. It's not tile, but let's just say it was. I'm going to be the customer. I'm going to call you, right? You're following back up with me on a lead that I sent in, and I'm going to lead the conversation, and I just want to see how you respond to it. And I'm going to throw objections at them, and I'm going to ask questions, and I basically just want to see what their process is, right? But role play, you can do that on the third interview. Role play people through certain elements of things that you think are essential to that skill set with the position you're hiring, and see if they exhibit that. Like make them actually perform for you as opposed to just asking them questions where they say they can do something.
Yeah. Well, it's super helpful, man, and just kind of connecting the dots all the way back to that mission statement. Like, do they even
Yeah.
align perfectly with that? Because if not, like 99.9 is not good enough. Like they have to be all in on that statement. So
Yeah, and
super helpful.
you'll miss on some people, but I always tell people hire slow and fire fast.
Mm.
Right.
You know,
That
take
is right.
do your diligence, put people through more in like, you know, I three interviews. Don't be afraid to have one of them spend some time with, you know, once you get people on your staff that you really, really think are winners, you want them to spend a half a day with one of those people and get their feedback on them too. You
Mhm.
know, and then if you get them in your organization and you recognize pretty quickly that they're not the right fit, cut them loose and don't let them, you know, potentially infect the rest of your team.
So quick.
Yeah.
Really good.
Super helpful, man. Thanks again for
Yeah,
coming on.
brother. I'm glad to
Really
be here.
Really good. Mr. Mraz is an entrepreneur right here.
Hey Eric,
Hey, Adam. How are you,
want
man?
to say I'm pretty good. I want to say thanks for coming in, especially last minute. I'm actually at a business conference right now out in
Oh,
Colorado.
sweet.
So, what the stuff that you've been saying is actually more useful for anyone who is starting their own business than a lot of the stuff at the conference. So I do appreciate it.
That's awesome.
So,
Who's throwing
uh,
the conference? Let's throw them under
Yeah,
the bus. No,
what
I'm just
conference is it?
yeah,
yeah.
well, it's National Association of Real Property Managers, so it's a property
Okay.
management
All right.
Gotcha.
conference. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is about running business and stuff. I just wanted to go back to kind of the question of pouring in versus cutting people. I would actually go with the side of cutting people, especially as you're a little bit if you're a little smaller organizations, just because those top 10% tend to be impatient, like you said, and if those bottom 10 or bottom people affect the outcome of those top people, those impatient people leave. So it's not even like, oh, keeping pouring into them might keep them around, but keeping around those shitty
Mm.
people could make those other
Yeah.
people leave. So my question would be, have you ever fired somebody and been like, man, I fired them too fast?
Good question.
um, no. Mm-mm. I've
I would agree.
yeah,
Almost everyone I've talked to is like, I waited twice as long as I should have,
yeah.
and they were
That's
screwing up twice as much. So that's why
that's
I'm
why,
like, I
yeah.
would actually throw cutting people in there over the pouring
Yeah.
in, because even you said that pouring into those top people, they start performing well, so that the other people feel uncomfortable and quit.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
still a way to cut them.
that was a part of it. So, I mean,
Yeah,
Matt would not let me pick both, or I would
pick
have picked
one.
both,
Yeah,
right? But,
fair.
I think that my thought process was, if I'm leaning towards, and I always cut people quick, like I said, but if I'm not, if my mental focus is on the negativity all the time, then I'm really not, because that's the mistake that I see a lot of business owners make is their focus always goes towards the things that make them unhappy, um, which is natural. That's how we're built, right? We just kind of, wherever the pain is where our attention goes.
Mm.
But when your energy always goes that direction, you tend to it's kind of like your kids, right? When you've got one kid who's always getting in trouble and you've got a different kid who's getting straight A's and never gets in trouble and does everything you ask them to do, the other one, especially if they're young, gets a lot more of your time and attention because you're constantly trying to get them to do what they're supposed to do.
Mm.
Whereas the one that doesn't, right, is doing everything you're asking them to do, but are they getting the same level of attention, and are you pouring into their growth, or are you just kind of saying, hey, they're really good at it already, they're naturally good, I don't have to give as much attention over there. And what I've seen happen sometimes with the high performers is, while you're focused on the other people, they do their job, they're really good at it, but they tend to sometimes feel like they're plateauing in your organization, or that they're maxing out because they're not being developed. And so then they start to see, or start to wonder, you know, do I have any place else to go? And the minute somebody comes along and tells them how great they are and all the different things they can do for them, they're more easily kind of wooed over to somebody else because you haven't poured into them to help their growth. And so I would say, I'm not saying don't cut people. Yes, cut people, but just make sure that those people aren't getting all your energy, that you really have a plan in place to help the people who are good get better and feel like they've got a place to go, and that they really recognize that you're going to pour into them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I just thought that deserved a little more conversation around that.
Yeah,
So
no, I got you.
don't leave that cut out of there.
Oh, trust me, I'm not leaving it out, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the beauty of the Socratic style too, of only giving you one option, because the answer usually is somewhere in both, and there
Yeah.
is more nuance, but it's just getting you to the point of going, okay, which one has the most direct impact, and you know what you're talking about too with the energy portion of this, right? With the focus portion of that, you know, I think it was might have been Nietzsche's, is you know, be careful as you stare too long into the abyss, lest the abyss stares back at you. And right, and
Yeah, that's
that
exactly right.
that's I mean that's real. You know,
That's
when
right,
you're
dude. You're
focused
right.
always on those fires, you start to feel like everything is a fire, and that's not necessarily the case. And you miss a lot of the good because you're so busy staring at the bad. You know,
Well, you ruminate on that too, right? I mean, it doesn't just get your energy at work, it gets your energy at home. Like
that's
when you
right.
when you leave, you're
Yeah,
constantly, those people are in your head, or what they're supposed to be doing and they're not doing is in your head. And then,
right,
it stirs you up, not just in your brain, but it stirs you up emotionally. You get more stressed out by the whole thing.
right.
So it's, and getting rid of them is super important. Again, I'm not saying keep them,
Yeah.
but if you are really developing other people, and they're coming along and you're really seeing them elevate, that does the opposite. You actually, instead of kind of being neutral, like, okay, I got rid of that person, I can breathe, right?
Mhm.
Now you start to get some energy back from your business because you
That's
start to
right.
see things happen that are super positive with this other person, and that will feed you emotionally versus deplete
Mm.
you. And I think
Bingo.
that's just as important to do, because if you're not getting like fed from what you are doing, why are you doing it?
That's right. That's exactly right. And gents, I mean, if this doesn't speak directly to what we talk about, you know, in that second month, when we're taking a look at the lead principle, we're talking about time and energy management. It's understanding the energy associated, whether it's something that is an energy cost or whether it's something that there is a gain with
Yeah.
what it is that you are doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, who you're doing it with. All of those things have that energy component that are in there that we fail to take into account as much as we should. Yeah, that's really good.
It's that's a huge one. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I did just from a lifestyle perspective, like I've always trained and worked out and done all like that's always been a huge part of my life. But I'm not a morning person by nature. I'm not built that way, right? And about 3 years ago, this was all part of the other thing that we talked about earlier, and I decided I was going to like completely tip that on its head, and I started getting up at 4:45 in the morning.
Mhm.
And very first thing I do is I've this is the third year in a row I've read through the Bible in a year. So I do my Bible study, which is about 30 to 45 minutes because I'm not just like reading a little thing. I'm like actually reading a lot of text and studying it. And then I have probably 10 minutes of prayer time, and then I go straight to the gym. And so like I don't open an email, I don't think about work, I don't do any of that crap until I've been up and moving for probably 2.5 to 3 hours. And
Mhm.
so mentally, I'm in a completely different place by the time I finally open my computer than, when I used to get up at 6:30 and rush through, breakfast or whatever. And then I open my computer at 7:30 and I end up working all day long. And by the time I get to the end of the work, my workout stinks and I'm just drained, right?
Mhm.
And so in this situation, like by the time I go into my work time, I'm a lot more elevated emotionally. I'm a lot more charged. I've accomplished like two huge things in my day that I now don't even think I have to do later. And I bring a ton more to what I'm doing. And I actually find that I accomplish more and I work less.
I have no doubt. No, I love that, man. It made me think of another question too, but I want to get Dave in here first. Dave, let me get you in here.
Gents, forgive me if speak up if you can't hear because of
No,
wind or
you're good,
something.
brother.
I'm
You're
in the
good.
park. Eric, I'm looking at the Rocky Mountains. I'm in Golden, Colorado.
I'm so jealous of you right now.
Yeah. And your story, it's so crazy. I'm in a bit of a pain quagmire that I part of me joined Apogee, and I'm going to have these favorable collisions with humans and it's going to help me unlock some things. So my vision is elk hunting with my dad, with my brother. That's what but I'm up against this. I don't know. It's elusive. I'll just leave it at that, right? For now. Do you feel like the person who helped unlock your pain situation was like that unique of an craftsperson, an artisan, or was it a particular methodology that they utilized? That's like part one. And then
Yeah.
how much of the like I'm basically in a mental battle daily of like, I got to go conquer nevertheless and simultaneously solve my puzzles. So it's just, I'm kind of in this, I don't know if it's a weird spot, but that's the spot I'm in.
Yeah. So from what he told me, he said there's about 10% of the physical therapists in the country that approach things the way he does, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
this kind of traditional physical therapy, which is movement, electronic stim, a little bit of manipulation, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
His is like totally different. Where everyone was telling me do less, he started me doing light deadlifts and he was having me doing all kinds of different stability exercises and lengthening exercises to basically take all this stuff that was, 5 years of non-use that was super super tight and was contributing to a lot of the associated pain. It was super tight, so it was also causing nerve pain. And so his whole thing was, I'm going to strengthen and lengthen, which was very different than what everyone else was doing. And when I kind of talked to him about it as we got to know each other better, he said there's probably about 10% of the physical therapy world that thinks this way. He's a PhD. Um, but if you want to connect offline, I can talk to him and figure out, hey, could you potentially help me find a guy, wherever you are that might be able to, visit with you and see if that might help. And I could talk to you more about whatever you're dealing with, and that kind of stuff, because I also I did a procedure that was non-surgical, that was a cash pay kind of experimental type thing, and it was called a disc seal procedure, where they actually went in. This guy had created this goo, but it's basically fibrinogen and three other things that he put together and sealed the disc. so that it didn't leak fluid onto the spinal column, which was causing a lot of the neuropathic pain. And I guess I had like 5 leaky discs when he did that. But that also, over the course of a year, really helped contribute to a reduction in the neuropathic pain. So there's different, because I'm in the medical space, I'm kind of able to talk to a lot of people and help figure stuff out that probably other people would not have been able to. But I've got a client in Colorado, in Denver. So if you want to connect and have a conversation, I could potentially help you find somebody that maybe could give you better insight than you're getting now.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what was the second part of the mental part?
Well, it's just, whether it's like, for me, it's pain. I wake up and that's the game that I play in my head.
Where's the pain?
My feet, my back, my legs. It's kind of like this chronic inflammation that
Is it nerve pain?
partly nerve in my heels, but I think it's more just almost like an inflammation on a cellular level is what I've kind of, but then how to solve it has eluded me.
Gotcha.
So but I have right now I have a solid team of counsel. I call it like a team, board of advisors for my body.
Okay.
And but I'm just like, I know, yeah, I gotta come at it at a few different angles is my sense.
Yeah. I mean,
So
yeah, I was going to say, I can speak to so I will say I was never suicidal. Okay. I never thought I'm going to kill myself or I want to kill myself, but I did, like, up until that point where I had gotten to I had always kind of thought people who thought that way, like, they were weak. Right. And it was the first time I had ever been like, I get why somebody could go there. Right. I wasn't going to go there, but I was like, I get it. Like, because I was sitting there going, I'm like, okay, I'm 54. People in my life live really long. Like, my parents are all really old. And I was like, I'm not going to live with this for 20 or 30 years. Like, this is miserable. Like, that was the kind of, and then you get depressed, right? So I had really bad depression, really bad anxiety. All that stuff comes along with it. And like you said, you have to build a team of people to help deal with every different component of it to help you kind of come back from it. Because if you're trying to do with all that stuff on your own, it'll just crush you, man. Like, it crushes you mentally. And I've been there. I get it. So, like, yeah, I mean, if there's any way I can help, if you want to talk offline, I'll make sure Matt gives you my information. I'll help you any way I can.
ICAP, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And make sure to, however you communicate through this thing, send me your information, like, send me your name, like, right out of the gate too, so that I can, like, I have certain people I pray for every morning, and I want to make sure I get you on my prayer list, Dave.
Yeah.
Because I do believe in the power of prayer. Like, I believe if you got enough people praying for you, that it may not fix the problem, but I believe God will create pathways and interventions that can get you to a solution.
Yeah, I believe it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you. Yeah, that's awesome.
I feel for you. Like, I truly do.
Yeah, that's hard, man. One of the things you were talking about in there with one of the gentlemen kind of spurred something on, and all the best leaders that I know, and the leaders that I've learned so much from and pay attention to are also really uh, I don't know if voracious is the word, but they're learners, they're followers as well. And they've got people they pay attention to, and they've got people they take counsel from. And Dave was talking about, got a counsel for just a board of people that I go to for my own body, and so I believe everybody has those things. Who for you are the people that you look to in the different areas that you show up in life? So, like, guys that you look at and go, and whether you talk to them directly or not, it's just people that you look to and go, all right, man, I'm going to kind of pay attention to what this guy's doing or saying, maybe even for just this. Maybe it's just in the business world, or it's in the spiritual world, or whatever that looks like. Who are guys for you that you pay attention to, or that you allow to speak into your life?
Yeah. So, he's a relatively new friend. His name's Jay Burns. He's a plastic surgeon in Dallas, Texas. Um, Older than me. He's early 70s. Extremely strong in his faith. Very successful in his business. He went from he built a really large group practice, um, and brought, eventually built it up to a really big practice, and um, younger guys kind of did him dirty, and he ended up leaving that practice and starting a new one 5 years ago, and that's now super super successful. He speaks for a lot of different companies, but also really strong in his faith. And he's been a really good mentor to me since I've gotten to know him. Um, over in the hunting world, there's a couple guys. Joe Miles owns Osseo Gear. He's here in Columbia, South Carolina, and he's one of the best whitetail guys I've met. Um, Andy May is a really good whitetail hunter. Over on the elk hunting side, there's a guy out of Montana named Sean Mellon. So there's some of those guys. From in terms of being a father and being a good husband. I think the biggest thing there, and I struggled a little bit with sometimes in the church, especially in the South. Church is kind of like a social thing in many situations in the South. Everyone goes to church, but that doesn't mean that everyone is living for Christ. And that's probably one of the more difficult things that I've had, down here. But there's a few people. So when I first started coaching as a young man, Brad Scott was my head coach at University of South Carolina, and he was the first guy that I wanted to be like, who was living for God. A lot of the people I had seen at church and stuff like that were living a strong family life were not guys that I wanted to emulate. Like they were good Christians, but they weren't strong, at least the way I looked at it. And Brad had been the offensive coordinator at Florida State when they won a couple national championships in the late 90s. And he was the first guy that I remember the very first staff meeting that he had with us. I was 22 years old, and he had all these guys around the table who had won national championships. And I was literally in awe of where I was. I couldn't believe it. I was in this room. And he said, all right, here's how our staff meetings run. The first thing we do every day is we do a devotion. And he's like, and it's going to go around the table and everybody's going to do it a different day. And he said, I'm going to start it today, so you see what it looks like. And he said, no, he goes, not everybody in here may be a believer. So you don't have to do a devotion about Christ if you don't want to, but it has to be a devotion about improvement and something that you believe makes you better. Now, most people did do a devotion around God because most of the people in there were believers. That's just kind of who he hired. But he was the first guy that I saw that was a really strong family man, really poured into people, and was really strong in his faith. And I ended up becoming really good friends with his son, who at the time was in 8th grade. Ended up being the offensive coordinator at Clemson when they won their national championships, and he are still good friends to this day. And he's a great husband and a great father. And so those are a couple of the people. And then I've also got a guy in my church who I've known for a few years, who same kind of guy, big hunter. He's adopted 3 kids from China, plus he's got 3 of his own kids. He's been married for 30 something years. Just a really strong believer, but also a really strong, good dude, like kind of guy that you could call into in the morning and you'd never even question whether he was going to pick up the phone. And so that's kind of I think those 2 a.m. people are really hard to find in life. There are some 2 a.m. people that will pick up the phone, but are they also the kind of person that you want around your kids and that you're comfortable with around your wife, and that you want to be like, right? Those are the ones that I think are harder to find. So if you got a handful of those in your life, you're doing really well.
Man,
So
that's
those are some guys.
ooh, that's a different level too. I like that. I mean, that's, we talk about, and I wish I could remember who said it right now. I'm having a hard time, but talking about, there's a great quote that it's a greater compliment to be trusted than to be loved. And I think even between men, that's a tough thing. And you can love people that you don't necessarily trust. And I talk about trust in terms of, hey, if God's like, hey man, you're all set tomorrow, by the way. You're all gone.
Yeah.
You gotta leave your wife and kids with somebody, right? It's
Who
like,
would that
okay,
be?
who are those guys, right? Like who do I trust to that level?
Yeah.
But you added that extra element of, and you want to be like them. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
There's another guy too that who's really been his name's Bert Soren. He owns Soren X exercise equipment.
Yeah.
And Bert's the guy that got me into bow hunting.
Yeah.
And Bert's a believer. He's a quiet believer. He keeps those two things pretty separate, but he's a really strong family man, great husband. He's one of those guys that, I mean, he's been on Rogue, and he's one of those guys that all that stuff could go to his head. Like if that probably would go to 95% of people's head. And he's just like real all the time. And he's a guy that has been a really big influence in my life from a hunting standpoint, and it also helped me create a lot of connections. A lot of people that I've had on my podcast are people that I met, and because Bert, said, hey, just tell him Bert sent you or whatever. And
That's awesome.
great guy. He's opened a lot of doors for me. So that's another guy that's been a really important part of my life the last few years.
Yeah, Bert's obviously a well-accomplished individual, but I've never spoken to Bert, but I have a number of friends who are friends with Bert too, and I've never heard anybody say anything really to the contrary of what you just said.
You got to come to Winter Strong next year, Matt.
That's what I've heard. I've heard nothing but amazing things.
You got to come. It's
Yeah.
I can't even describe it.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but amazing things. That's awesome, man. I do want to take these guys through a debrief, but you said something else too that made me think of one other thing too, and um, so I wanted to throw it out there. When you're talking about the podcast, and we'll kind of come full circle here, and then we'll make sure people know where to find you and how we can support you best. But when you're talking about the podcast, and I spoke to Sage Steele this morning too with our women, and I asked her a similar thing because I woke up this morning and I took a look, and I'm like, okay, going down the day, and I knew I was going to get to speak with you, and I knew I was going to get to speak with Sage, and two people that for as little of the relationship that has developed so far with both of you, I'm like, man, these are just good humans. Yeah, doing really cool things. Yes. Got some great stories. You bet. Interesting backgrounds, of course. Really good people, and it's really obvious in the short amount of time. Just really good people, and I'm like, man, that's it. Like that's what we want. That's what we want to, with these conversations that we get to have every week. That's it. That's really what we want. Every once in a while, we'll veer off of that, and there's a weird intro, and we're like, all right, there's something to learn here, but foundationally, man, that's it. How are you taking a look at your podcast? Like, how are you choosing guests? Are you choosing them more for the things they are doing right now? Not that would be a bad thing at all. I'm just saying if you're focusing, you're learning from these other guys. Is it more, hey, I'm interested in learning this unique thing. This guy's been around a while. This guy's into this thing, but also has this other thing. Like, how do you look at the guests and go, yeah, I think that would be a fun one to have.
Yeah. So I can't remember who gave me this piece of advice around the podcast thing, but somebody told me pretty early on, pick people that you want to talk to. Because if you're always trying to pick somebody for your audience, you'll end up being disappointed with the conversation, and people won't like it and want to hear it anyway. So the whole reason I started it was to learn from people about hunting. So most of the people that I'm picking around the hunting space are people that have some kind of a specific skill set that I'm interested in learning more from, and that I also think would bring value to the people that listen to the podcast. The people that I bring in that are not in the hunting space, which are quite honestly are much harder to get. Like I would like to have more of those people, are also people that they do something that I have an immense amount of respect for, or they've got something that I want to learn, from them. So, I had Jack Carr on, the podcast last year, right before his last book came out, True Believer. That was an amazing conversation. He's a guy that I had read his book since the very first Terminal List came out. And I was an English major in college. And so I love writing. I love reading. I really have an appreciation for people who write well. And that was, like, I just was excited about talking to him, because I love the work that he did. That was just like an experience for me to be able to talk to him. And when I first scheduled that interview, True Believer was coming out the week before. So I thought I was going to have be one of the first people to talk to him right after the book came out. And then True Believer got bumped a month. So I talked to him before it came out, and it was a great conversation, but he had to put some teasers in there. We couldn't actually talk about the book. So that was awesome. And then I think there's a couple other people that, like, I had Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company in there, and
Yeah,
that
we've
was
had
very much
Josh.
a
Yep.
that was an entrepreneur conversation. We talked a lot about business building.
Yep.
So I think if it's not
I'm a speed,
hunting,
I'm a
then
speed
it's
goat right there.
yeah, you got your mini speed goat.
Right.
Yeah. I
Yep.
got that's the one I roll on my pack, and I got my Blackfoot in my whitetail pack.
Yep.
Um and so yeah, it's usually it's somebody. Now I will, faith, if it finds its way into the conversation, like I really believe I've God put it on my heart to be a lot more open about it on social media in the last, this year. So I've been a ton more open about it, and just kind of put it out there. Not that I've ever tried to hide it, but I've made it more of my platform
Gotcha.
recently. And so if the conversation goes that way on a podcast, then I'll just let it. So, but my podcast, I've usually got 6 or 7 questions written down.
Yep.
I just want to have a conversation with people and kind of let it go where it should go. And I've had a couple of people who the conversation literally turned into almost the whole podcast was about faith.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's around hunting and stuff that I want to learn from people, whether it's a hunter or whether it's an entrepreneur or whether it's a guy like Jack who just does something I think is super cool.
Awesome, man. I mean, I think that's two things to be successful in relationships in general, and podcast is a version of a relationship. It's just the desire to be curious about the other person, right? And be interested
Yeah,
in what they're doing over interesting. I mean, I think that's a huge part. And then when you've got life that you have lived, you inherently have stories to tell, and that's a thing people say, oh, how do you become a good storyteller? Well, part of it is just living enough to have stories that you can tell. I mean, that's a part of it. So when you got those two things, it's pretty easy
yeah,
to have a good conversation.
yeah. No, I I think also I'm trying to be a better listener.
Yeah.
That's I think people who by nature are achievers or whatever you want to call them tend to take up a lot of space in the room. That's just who they are. Um, and so I'm trying to take up less space and listen and learn more. I have to be conscious about it. But that's a big thing. Like the hunting thing for me, I love it, but a huge part of it has just been this development of this challenge of development, right? So when I retired from coaching, I'd spent 30 years on a football field. And I was like, what am I gonna do now that's gonna present a challenge for me? And I just through a mutual friend had lunch with Bert, and he starts pulling out this hunting app and starts talking about bow hunting. And now my dad didn't hunt growing up. My brother did, but I was always on a football field and I didn't have any interest in it. And he made it sound super cool. Um, and I literally went and bought a bow like a month later. And the thing that's been really unique about it for me has been I'm learning something that most of these guys learned growing up.
Mhm.
They've been doing this for 30 years. There's stuff that they take for granted that I'm like, what? But it's a it's this challenge, right? It's this mental challenge that I'm putting myself through. And I'm just creating a different opportunity for development that's outside of business. And that's as I've gotten older, I appreciate all the things that my business brings me. But when you're young, you are working towards success and financial stability. And that flips itself on its head when you get to a certain point in your career because your time is a lot more important than making another whatever 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, whatever you make. 2 more clients for me is not as important to me as being able to take 4 or 5 weeks off a year, and being able to go to Colorado for a week elk hunting or, go up to Missouri for a week chasing whitetails. Even if I strike out, just being able to do it and the experience of doing it, um, just challenging myself is awesome. Like, I think that's, the minute you stop presenting yourself with challenges, and they don't always have to be physical. A lot of them, mentally, like learn something new from somebody, do something hard, whatever it is. I think that the science there's science behind it. Like when you do something new mentally and stress your brain mentally, you develop parts of your brain that if you don't do that, that eventually atrophy. You're actually creating
That's
neural
right.
pathways.
That's right.
And so I think it's something you should always do.
And I like how you differentiate it too, because doing hard things does matter. Doing new hard
Yeah.
things or something that presents itself in a new way, it does matter. So even hunting, I mean, there's so many things, chasing new animals in a new environment in a new season or whatever, that like that in of itself gives you all of these variables. That's so good. I love it, man. Yeah, I love this guy too, man. All right, Eric, you slid in there. You get the last one on the outside, sir. Go for it. Oops.
Thank you so much. I will try to keep this question as succinct as I can, Mr. Wilson. So I'm 52 years old with a 5-year-old boy. I
All
have
right.
zero hunting in my family. I live in Boise, Idaho, and I just recently made a new friend who is an A-10 pilot, also owns his own plane, and apparently lives right down the street from a fourth generation uh, hunter. And one of the things that he brought up was um, that his ability to fly, and with this guy who taught him to hunt 9 years ago, has the ability to get into the Frank Church area, which I hear is legendary hunting. So,
You're starting off on the right foot, Eric. Let me tell you.
so for somebody with zero experience, who I want this to be something that will become a part of my boy becoming a man, being self-sufficient, all those things. Plus, I would like to learn that skill set as well. So obviously going into Frank Church from zero experience, that's a big leap. So how do I get started with this? And can you tell me a little bit about, like, how do I structure this out to get from where I am at zero to being able to go on a hunt like that?
Is it a bow hunt or a rifle hunt?
You can, that would be another question. Like, what weapon do I choose? Because
Yeah.
when you go into that area, you can use anything and everything.
So in most places there's seasons, right? So and I don't know the other thing is you got to find out about tags, right? So there's in most states you have to build up points to be able to buy tags. It's not like you can just go into a Walmart and buy, an over-the-counter tag and hunt like a deer, right? Elk points, they call them points, but and I don't know the specific rules around Idaho because I haven't applied in Idaho. But in general, what happens in the western states is each state has their own process, but you have to apply for a tag every year. And in most of the states in the West, you have to build up a certain amount of points before you're ever going to draw a tag because there are so many other people who are trying to draw a tag as well. And in each one of those states, they're broken down into what they call hunting units. And so not only do you have to draw a tag, but you have to apply for a tag in a specific unit. And the more desirable the unit is, the harder it is to draw a tag. So and I don't know if this is the case with the Frank Church, but I know that in some states it could take 20 years to draw a tag in a specific unit. Now, if you're in a state where somebody's got private land, like let's say this guy has a relationship with somebody that has private land in the Frank Church, then sometimes that'll trump everything because a lot of states will grant the landowners a specific amount of tags. And as long as you're willing to pay for it or somebody's willing to pay for it for you, you can get a tag like right out of the gate. So those are things you have to navigate is A, how do I get a tag? Is it a private landowner tag or is it a public tag? And if it's public, then how many points do I have to build up to actually get it? And those tags are specific to hunting seasons. So you have to decide whether you're going to apply for a bow, a bow tag, which is a specific time of the year, versus a rifle tag, which are other specific times of the year. So they'll usually have early season bow tags, late season bow tags, and then they'll usually have 2 to 3 different rifle tags, depending on when you're trying to hunt. And you have to apply for a specific time with a specific weapon in a specific unit. So there's a big learning curve. Again, I'm glad to communicate with you offline to help you navigate that. That's really how I figured it all out. Like I had to talk to a lot of people to learn it. I will tell you a really good resource. There is a website called gohunt.com, GOHUNT, and they actually have a tool on there that, first of all, they do a ton of articles around Western game hunting, and they're specific to states. So you're usually going to be able to find something in their archives around whatever state you're looking for. They have a weekly podcast. It's all focused on Western game hunting. And this is the time of year where a lot of their episodes are focused around tag strategies in specific states. So if you listen to one of those podcasts, you'll probably be able to find one around Idaho, which will give you a lot of insight. And then the biggest thing is decide from a learning curve perspective, it's going to be a heck of a lot faster to get up to speed on a rifle than it will on a bow. You know, I decided that I wanted to go all in on a bow, and I started shooting, I think in February before I was going to start my first season whitetail hunting. And I was shooting 40 to 60 arrows a day from February until August just to get ready for deer season. So if you're going to shoot a bow, especially out west, you have to be proficient out to at least 60 yards, because a lot of the shots out there are going to be, you know, in when you're hunting whitetail, if you're good out to 30 yards, those are going to be most of your shots. When you're out west hunting elk, you're going to have to be proficient out to 60. So if you want to just, how do I get up to speed fastest? It's going to be on a rifle.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. And again, I'm glad to share my information. You can ping me, text me, call me, whatever. And I'm glad to answer any questions, because it wouldn't take me very long to do a little homework and kind of know how to guide you in Idaho, just because I've applied to a lot of other states. And so I know the process. I just have to figure out what Idaho's process would be.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love that. I'd appreciate that help. Be great.
Yeah. But you've got a really good, I mean, knowing someone that knows the area and that can, you know, take you in there, that's half the battle. Because most of the time you have to pay, you know, if you hired a guide to go into one of those spots, you're going to pay, you know, on the low end, 8,000, but you could pay up to 15 to 20,000 for an elk hunt, with a guy, if you're going in with a guide. And, lots of times those guides are booked out 2 years in advance, you know, and so it's not easy getting in there. So if you've got someone who actually knows the area, you know, because otherwise you got to go in by yourself. And if you don't, you know how to do all that stuff, it's like I prepared for 1.5 years to go do it, to kind of know how to pack and what to do. And, you know, like, cause that was new to me too. I hadn't done that before. So,
Right.
you know, it takes a lot of prep, but I've kind of done all the heavy lifting on that stuff. So I'm glad to share any of it that I can with you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and my understanding of this hunt is that you know, part of it is the fact that we have somebody that has a plane. So my understanding is you can get over the counter elk tags because it's such a challenging hunt, because they don't allow anything with wheels in there. So it's all primitive, like grizzlies, wolves are prevalent. Like it's a for real deal hunt is my understanding. But if you can get in there, like you can get a big bull, just because there's not a lot of people that can get there.
Interesting.
My
Yeah, I hadn't heard
understanding,
that one before. I know that Idaho
Yeah.
they have a lottery. They're the first state that actually does the draw every year, and it's in December. It's the only state that does a December draw. And it's a nightmare because you basically have to get online. In their state, there's no points, right? So you get online for this, it's open draw, and you basically get in a digital line. And people have sat there for 8 hours, you know, and you have to basically wait for them to go, okay, you're in queue. And as soon as you're in queue, you have to put in your application, know what game unit you're applying to, all that kind of stuff. So it sounds like somebody knows something, you know, that may
Yeah.
be unique, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely reach out to you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm
And
glad
thanks
to
for
help
getting
you.
me in, Matt. Appreciate you, man.
You bet, Mr. Toto. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you.
And wolves sounds like a horrible idea. I had a friend that was in a movie about that. It's called The Gray. If you don't, that's a good, real feel good movie, man. So if you want to watch something, maybe check that out and remind yourself what wolves and grizzlies are like. So
Yeah, grizzlies especially. They're,
oh man,
you know,
no.
that's the real deal. There's a lot of people that won't even go into grizzly country.
Yep, nope. I'm all set.
You're like, I'm good.
I'm all set, man. All set. Hey, man. Really, really grateful for all this. So, you know, we want to
I've
make
enjoyed it. It's been great.
so good. We want to make sure people know where to find you. We want to make sure we know how to support you as an organization. But again, just and doing this publicly, man, open invite, not that far away from the farm, man. So you and your family are always welcome out here.
I'll talk offline and find out the deets because I'm going to take you up on it.
Come on down.
My daughter goes to college up in Elon, so
Oh yeah, dude, gotta come on out. We'll wrestle
yeah.
some and just have a good time, man. So where does everybody find you, and how do we support you best?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at Eric Wilson Coaching.
Mm.
And that's just if you want to, like, I post all my podcast episodes and stuff there. I don't post a ton of personal stuff. It's mostly podcasts, that kind of stuff. I do, like if I do a trip or something like that, I'll post some stuff there, but I don't put a ton of stuff. My wife doesn't love being on social media, so I don't put her stuff on there. And my daughter's got her own thing, and I don't want to embarrass her putting her on my. I let her do her business, but so at Eric Wilson Coaching on Instagram, and then my YouTube channel it's Do Not Go Quietly. It's the Do Not Go Quietly podcast. So if you just search Do Not Go Quietly with Eric Wilson on YouTube, you'll find it there. Exact same thing on Spotify. Exact same thing over on Apple Podcasts. So you can find it on any of those. So the podcast is Do Not Go Quietly, and then it's just at Eric Wilson Coaching on Instagram. And the biggest thing for me, like when Matt asked me to come on, I've had a lot of people, pour into me over my life, and I'm still always looking for opportunities to learn. But big thing that God has put on my heart and in the last few years is, I've never thought that I would be as blessed as I am in so many areas of my life, whether it's my marriage or whether it's my health or whether it's, the life I get to live hunting and doing all these things that I just have a passion for. Like that, a lot of that has come because people have been willing to pour into me in different areas of my life. And I want to do the same thing for others. So if there's anything that I can ever help anybody with, whether it's a business or the situation with Dave with like a health situation that might be similar because I'm in the medical field. I may not know the answer, but I can usually find someone that knows the answer. And, I kind of run in circles with a lot of people who are in the performance world. So they tend to look at things differently, like whether it's stem cells or whether it's, some alternative types of therapies that your normal doctor may not even know about. Those things can make a difference in some situations. So if I can be a resource in any way, how do you want, Matt, do you want to like, if I want to give phone number and email, do you want to just send that out in an email to people or you want me to give it now?
I can't, so I want to put this part on the podcast, and I don't want to
Okay.
blast
Gotcha.
your stuff out there. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, so like
Send it
Dave,
to your group.
Eric, yeah, if you guys don't mind, like let me know, and I can I can make sure to get you that info right
Yeah.
there.
If anybody wants to reach out and connect with me, just reach out to Matt and you're welcome to give my phone or my email to anybody. And also too, if you go to my Instagram, my phone number and you can email me and you can get my phone number on my Instagram channel. So
Oh my man,
I'm pretty accessible.
there you are. Awesome, man. Spoken like a true leader. Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you. Thanks. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate the time to visit with everybody. It's a great group.
Oh man, honor is ours.
Blessed.
Take them through a little debrief over the next 20 minutes or so, and I'm gonna shoot you a message here before my next meeting tonight.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Awesome.
being here.
Appreciate you.
God bless you.
You as well.
See y'all.